Hi there, Eric Turnison here, founder of MemberMouse and also the host of the Subscription Entrepreneur Podcast. This week on the podcast, we interviewed Claire Whitmer, who's the Director of Digital Product Strategy at Make.co. And for that episode, and given that it's the holidays, I actually composed a new piece of music for the podcast. And so in the spirit of Make.co and what they do, which is teaching people how to make things and sharing how things are made, I figured I'd shoot a fun little video and show how I create the music for the podcast. So essentially the music starts with a string motif, which I'll play here. Oops, sorry. I played the whole thing. I'm just going to solo the strings. So this is what the current is. You just have some cellos and basses down here, violas, and then violins at the top. So just to give you a sense of how this works, right? Each one of these tracks represents an instrument. And if I open up my instrument panel here, I can select for each one of these tracks which instrument I want. And for this one, this is the strings. And I have a keyboard where I can play in what I want. And so this is the line. For the basses and the cellos. And so I'll just record that in, which I've done here. So if you hear that, that's the bass line. And then when I'm ready, I just go back and record the different parts. I'm not really good at playing it live, but you get the point. So I just go over and over again, adding the instruments that I want and recording them. So this is the string section. That's already done, and it's essentially the theme for the podcast in general. So then I ask myself, okay, well, how do I make this sound like the holidays? And to me, the first things that come to mind are percussion. So if I open up my percussion here, I do the same exact process. I add a different track for each instrument that I want to add to it. And first thing that comes to mind is sleigh bells, like horses riding through the snow with the sleigh bells on. So here's the sleigh bells being that I've added. And then I add a wood block too, which to me sounds like the hooves of the horse running along. So that's that. And then I just have a bass drum playing every once in a while. And then thinking back to, I like the Nutcracker a lot, and that reminds me a lot of Christmas. And to me, you have the Celeste, which is the sound from the Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairies. So I add the Celeste and the Glockenspiel in to give that kind of those high notes, which to me evoke the snow falling or ice crystals or something like that. And then I just have the harp mirroring that as well to just give it a little bit more body. So now if I solo the percussion and the strings, we can see that's starting to take shape. Okay, so now we've got our percussion and our strings. And then to kind of give the main aspect a little bit more body, I have the winds and the brass doubling the strings. So here's just the winds, the woodwinds, which is essentially just playing the same thing as the strings at this point. But then at some point we come into this kind of section B, and here we get some solo instruments in, and I have the horns and the clarinets playing this line. And I can double click into any of these instruments and you see the notes. This is the note data. So we can see, let me just solo one of these instruments. I'll solo the horns, French horns. So if I double click into this, you can see, where is it? Right here, the note data. So it shows me which notes are being played. If I click on it, it plays the note that's being played. Now, with longer instruments like this, there's also expression data because it's being held for a certain period of time. So you see this data down here. This is actually expression data. So if I'm just playing on my keyboard, right? If I play a chord, I'm moving the mod wheel. And you can see as I move it down and up, the the expression of the instrument changes. So this is really valuable when you're playing longer lines. You can really have the instrument be very expressive, like a true musician would if they're playing it, right? So that's what this data is down here. It was recorded as I performed it, and it's just showing it. So that's what this sounds like. And if I add in the strings, and then I have the clarinet doubling that line, essentially. Okay, and so the last piece that I added was a choir. I was in a choir when I was younger, and to me, a choir just is a lot about Christmas, you know, singing in these cathedrals, the reverberation of the space and everything. So if I just mute everything, again, I just add the tracks for the sopranos, tenors, bass, choose the instruments, and now on my keyboard, again, with the expression wheel, I play in whatever line I want. So I'll just skip to a part where I have the full choir performing. And again, you can see the note data and the expression data that's happening with this. And for me, like the choir is really important, you know, to crescendo over time, and then in decrescendo is just what would naturally happen if you were singing a line. That's why there's a lot of this kind of wavy looking expression data for the performance. You can see all the parts here. Okay, so there's one more thing that to me is very Christmassy in orchestral music or carol music, and that is a trumpet descant, you know, like a trumpet line that's playing over top. So again, I just load in my trumpet instrument. Right, and then I just play the line that I want, which is this. Okay, and now if I listen to all the brass at the same time with that, from the choir, from the woodwinds, percussion, strings. And then I come into a whole nother section here. But basically that's essentially it, you know, just doing that over and over again, all the different parts. Now there's one final thing that's pretty cool to be able to do with this is putting these instruments in a space. So I have this convolution reverb called Altiverb, come on, which I can basically put instruments in any space that I want. And let me just solo just one instrument just so you can get an idea of what this is about. So I'm going to bypass this for a second. So you hear when I play these strings, the tail on the string, that's the reverb. That's the sound of the space or the acoustics that it's being played in. So you can see it's a little bit dry. It's not as echoey. When I activate this convolution reverb, it puts it in this space. So you can see it's a little bit more echo, but what's really cool is like I have all these spaces available to me. For example, I could go and put these violins in the Great Pyramids. Or this mausoleum. You can hear there's a really long echo on that. So obviously, reverbs that are really long wouldn't work for certain types of music, like this one, for example. It would just create too much havoc. But it's really fun to just play around and put instruments in different environments. For example, the Notre Dame Cathedral. fact, I bet choir would sound really good in here. Right. So anyway, that's one of the final polishing things, is to add in the reverb, and then everything's good to go. So let's just take a listen to it.